About welcome to the policy briefing for threats to our federal arts and cultural agencies slated for the next hour. We're appreciative that you're all here to join us and hear the latest implications for Delaware and calls to action. We have about 350 people who RSVP'd for this. I expect many just want to make sure they're following along with any follow-up information. If this grows as we go, please continue to introduce yourselves in the chat. I will happily introduce myself as well as we get going here. To give you a sense, we're going to start with a welcome and some context information. We're going to hear from the panelists that you see represented here on the screen from Delaware Division of Libraries, Everylibrary, the Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs, Delaware Humanities, and the Division of the Arts. We have a few representatives from our congressional offices, and if there's other state officials that want to comment at the end or any updates, they're welcome to. And then we'll wrap up with some calls to action. Please, if you haven't already, you're all ahead of the game here. Introduce yourselves using the chat function. Happy to know your name, if you're affiliated with any organization, and then if you're working in any particular area of the state. I see already we have really strong representation across arts, libraries, humanities, Kent, Sussex, Newcastle, which is unexpected and really a positive sign. We launched this Monday afternoon registration, and within 48 hours had, like I said, over 300 registered, which speaks to your need for communication and our desire for information. So I hope that this hour will give you with the information that you're looking for. If we haven't met before, my name is Neil Kirschling. I'm the Executive Director of the Delaware Arts Alliance. We are the statewide arts advocacy organization that serves as the unifying voice for the arts. We represent and work with 50 different organizational members and a whole host of individual advocates. By you joining here today, hope you'll consider yourself an arts advocate as well as an advocate for the humanities and the libraries. Last year, we released the CREATE plan after 2 years of research, which outlines a comprehensive vision for supporting Delaware's creative economy. That plan recognized the importance that arts organizations, libraries, and humanities organizations, including museums, play for the state of Delaware economically, as well as all the other benefits we know come with supporting these cultural and artistic organizations. I'm joined by my colleague, Jordan Resch, our engagement and operations coordinator, and we will be your MCs for the day, hearing from a whole host of experts across the state. Some objectives, just to level set, we are here to give you the most up-to-date information that we have. You will hear directly from our partners. We will talk through implications for Delaware's creative economy and hopefully organize us all around some common calls to action we can take to stand united against threats to our arts and cultural institutions at the federal level. Housekeeping, we have already started recording. Please utilize the chat function as you already have to introduce yourself, to give reactions, perspectives, and updates. We also have a Q&A function on this webinar where you can submit questions for speakers as we go. You have the ability to upvote and comment on those questions. If you submitted a question beforehand, we've baked it into the information we will hopefully provide, so you shouldn't have to repeat yourself. And then lastly, give grace here. We are going to give you the best information that we have as available today. Nothing constitutes legal or financial advice, and it all may change as of tomorrow. But we understand the importance of having an open dialogue with our constituencies and understand the fear that comes with not knowing and seeing headlines and seeing things on social media. So we're doing our best to get you the information as we know it today. That being said, the group here has prepared a pretty lengthy slide deck. I'll give you the heads up. It may feel like you're drinking from the, what's the phrase, the fire hydrant here. We'll do our best to summarize key takeaways. Know that you don't have to memorize or learn all the details, but we want to be as comprehensive as possible for those of you that sort of want to get in the weeds of things. If you can't stay for the full hour, here are the calls to action. You can start them now. Jordan will put a link in the chat for a way that you can contact your elected officials. We've compiled information from our national partners across libraries, humanities, and arts onto one page with some Delaware data that you can use to personalize a message to your legislators at the federal level. We've got links to stay informed, which we won't drop now, but we can share later with all of us or with our national partners. And then lastly, there are ways to donate if you feel so inclined to support our organizations that are spending time and energy to make sure this funding continues. So with that, let us jump right into the panel. We're going to go libraries, museums, humanities, and arts, sort of in that order. I've prepared a few questions for us all, but before we do, I want to give us some contextual information about the federal budget. What are we talking here? We hear NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for the Humanities, Institute for Museum and Library Studies. What does that mean? These are three major federal arts and cultural agencies that have been funded since decades ago. They are all required in federal statute to exist. A budget was passed last year that allocated $207 million to all of the states for the NEA and NEH and $294 million for IMLS. Of that, $940,000 came to Delaware for the arts, $950,000 for the humanities, and $1.5 million, which includes museums and libraries through IMLS to Delaware. If you've been following the news, you've seen the government avoided shutdown a few times by passing continuing resolutions over the past few months. Those continuing resolutions stipulated that the last amount of funding for these institutions would continue into the next year. So FY25 federal budget has allocated roughly the same amount of funding to the states for these purposes. FY26 is the next upcoming budget year. That has not happened yet. Largely, the monies that we'll be talking about within each of these agencies are monies that were expected and promised through legislation that has already been passed by Congress. The next budget making process will begin imminently, likely, well, it's already beginning, but the president will likely introduce his proposed budget next month. These are not a comprehensive list of all federal funding for arts, humanities, and libraries. We, of course, get money from other pots of funding, other federal agencies, including the U.S. Education Department. You can see here there's money earmarked for arts education. Many of our organizations likely have applied for, maybe received congressionally directed spending, otherwise known as earmarks, from our three members of Congress. As we understand it, those were cut for FY25. We do not know what the outcome of those will be for FY26, though the application portals are open at the moment. Any other big picture federal context I should add from the panel before we dive in and go section by section? It is hard for me to moderate such a large chat and present. So if I'm missing big questions in the chat or in the Q&A, Jordan and others feel free to chime in and say, hey, this is a good question. Let's clarify it as we go. So with that, I'm going to ask Annie and Peter, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourselves for the group, please. And then I've got a few questions I can walk us through. After you introduce yourself, mostly just sort of what is the latest that you have heard as it relates to IMLS FY25 funding for Delaware?
Thank you, Neil. I'm Dr. Annie Norman, the state librarian, and I do want to thank Neil and the Delaware Arts Alliance for inviting libraries to this conversation. I'd like to acknowledge the Delaware Library Association. I saw Scott Buzinski, the president, and Catherine Wimberly, the Legislative Action Chair, are here, and thank them for their wonderful support. And also, as you mentioned, presenting with me is Peter Bromberg from Everylibrary, which is their national library advocates who are concerned about the partners as well. And of course, there's value in coalitions working together. So yeah, Neil had already put together this timeline of how things unfolded. I thought I might share a little bit in this because I was serving on the board of IMLS. And so that was, a little, just for what it's worth, a little backstory, inside information. So on Friday, March 14th, of course, the CR passed, which we thought, oh, we're out of the woodwork. But then the same day the EO passed, or EO was issued to minimize the Institute of Museum and Library Services to the minimal statutory level. The library community rallied, Everylibrary, the American Library Association, Also COSLA, which is the chief officers of state library agencies. And then, of course, our wonderful congressional staffers were sending letters and monitoring. And at the beginning, I kind of started a thread with 3 staffers from the congressional office. Now I'm up to 10, which I'm so honored, and hope I'm not bugging them too much, but we are in a crisis. So on Sunday, March 23rd, and of course, that was how the board members spent the weekend, kind of scrambling because we weren't getting direct information, but managed to pull together a board letter, which was sent to the new acting director, Sonderling. So that happened that first week. We got no response. On Monday, March 31st, all the staff were riffed. And then Thursday, April 3rd, the IMLS board submitted a second letter to Sonderling. And that afternoon, all the board members each received termination letters. We knew it was coming. We were talking about it the entire time. Well, we were expecting to be terminated any minute, but the second letter is what seemed to trigger it. And then on Friday, April 4th, that's when the AGs from 21 states, including Delaware, filed suit in Rhode Island. We also saw at that same time period, there were 3 state library agencies. It was Washington, California, and Connecticut received letters terminating immediately the current grants to states, LSTA awards. And several SLAs of state library agencies have also received on an ongoing basis. We've seen the NEH grant termination letters and discretionary grants terminations overnight. It's like every morning I'm afraid to open my email because like what new hell has come in overnight from all of these. I did have a meeting today with some of the state librarians, and I was saying, do you think that it was those 3 states that got the terminations, do you think that was a mistake? Like, frankly, they don't know what they're doing. Did they perhaps just mean to terminate the discretionary grants and not the annual grants to states? And at least one of those states was on the meeting. She says, no, this was deliberate, and it was based on DEI, which had been in their plans, I guess. So the impact of LSTA, the grants to states, on Delaware, the Division of Libraries, we support the statewide library infrastructure, the Delaware Library Network and Catalog, transit between libraries, also Delaware Library Access Services, which is the talking books for persons with print disabilities. The Social Innovation Team works with social services partners to assist patrons in need at the libraries. And we're going to see more patrons in need now more than ever. When times are tough, library use increases. So in addition to LSTA, and you mentioned the earmark grants, the list of federal grants that we depend on. So in addition to LSTA, which is the main one, we also receive E-rate reimbursements, which are critical for the Delaware Library Network. We have 2 earmark grants, one for teleservices and then one for school libraries. And those are earlier, but because they terminated 2024 grants to states, I'm also concerned that they could go backwards to terminate some 2024 grants. That's my fear. I hope not. We have ARPA for the library construction. Hopefully that's okay. We have AmeriCorps Vistas for the Delaware Library's social innovation team. We're kind of concerned about what's going to happen with AmeriCorps Vistas because, their whole mission is about poverty, which is a DEI issue. And then also, we're supposed to be getting, Delaware got the BEAD grant, And the libraries are supposed to get some bead for digital literacy training. And there are two states, Delaware and one other state. This is according to Roddy Flynn from Representative McBride's office, said that there are two states that have been approved, so we should get it. We were fully approved, but we haven't seen it. Okay, so for me, what I look at is budget survival. What if the worst case scenario happens? How do we survive? And what is the new normal if we are without federal funds? And the biggest fear of the libraries is always, what about our state aid, our library standards funding? And I'm pretty comfortable saying that the state aid funds would not be affected. That's unless all of state government is hit. And then my question there is, so how does this compare? We've already been through the Great Recession, right? So how does this, size-wise, how does this compare to the Great Recession, so that we would have a sense of like how we need to plan? We might be better off than other states. Not certain. Delaware Libraries just survived a ransomware attack last fall. Yeah, there was a $1 million hit. And of course, these attacks are a matter of if, not when. But we're going to have residual financial effects of this network emergency in fiscal year 2025 or 20, yeah, right, in the fall, 2026. And plus the additional LSTA hit if we have that. But two financial crises back to back is a high bar for survival. We've been sending Delaware Libraries patron stories for the last 3 weeks. We've been sending them stories to the congressional staffers, and hopefully those are helpful to them in this work. And that's all I have in my notes. And now I'd like to turn it over to Peter Bromberg from Everylibrary. As I mentioned, they support libraries nationally and especially Delaware libraries. I mean, I wouldn't have done this without Everylibrary and the congressional staffers and the AGs, WD, all of these specialists have been helping us. And so I brought Peter to share him with you as well. So, Peter?
Annie, and thank you, Neil, for inviting me to be here today. I'm coming to you from Salt Lake City, Utah, where I'll just mention I've also sat on the board for many years with the Utah Cultural Alliance. So I think that's kind of a sibling organizations here in the Mountain West. So where we are at today, I think some of this has been noted already. You know, we had the April 4th Attorney General lawsuit, which Delaware is a part of, filed on April 4th. And I just want to stress that this is the current stage of the campaign to restore IMLS funding and agency functionality. I mean, like, this is the moment we're in now. And I'll give a shout out to Attorney General Kathy Jennings for leadership on this. But again, that brief recap is, you know, we got here due to this executive order, as well as Director Sonderling putting staff on admin leave, dismissing the board, and has now begun cutting off the funding and terminating grants to states effective April 5th, Washington, Connecticut, California, right? So since that suit has been filed, nothing fundamentally has changed. This is the moment that we're in. From Everylibrary's national perspective, right, we are concerned with the systemic dismantling and defunding of cultural institutions, not just libraries. I mean, we're Everylibrary, so that's our mission focus. But of course, we're part of this larger fabric of democracy and the cultural institutions that underlie it. So we are very concerned about the whole cloth approach that the administration is taking to dismantling IMLS, as well as other cultural institutions, NEA, NEH, PBS, NPR, Kennedy Center, Smithsonian, right? This is all of a piece. And there are systemic and systematic issues here that we will need to deal with as a result of the targeting of these funding sources. So looking ahead, I mean, we have to think about this funding not being there, and what are we going to do about that, right? So these are community anchor institutions that will need support from local and state governments. and how we do that together, and that we do this together, that we are coming together on these systemic issues is going to be of vital importance. And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, right? But there's just no luxury for us to be going this alone. There's great power in us coming together, and I really appreciate the Arts Alliance, convening this very important call. Um, we have great concern also, if this isn't on your radar already, for the 250th, the semi-quincentennial, I think is what it's technically called, right? Where we're celebrating America's 250th birthday. What does all of this mean in terms of this systemic attack on our institutions? What does it mean for our 250th? We have these core American cultural institutions beholden not to their mission, not to the Constitution, but to the rhetoric and pressures of the administration. And I'm going to take a brief detour from my comments just to share this with you. Some of you may have been receiving these letters canceling the grants, and this is a quote from a grant cancellation notice that was received by an agency yesterday, that the IMLS has determined that your grant is unfortunately no longer consistent with the agency's priorities and no longer serves the interests of the United States, and that IMLS is repurposing the funding in a new direction in furtherance of the president's agenda. That's a quote. So this is very concerning, right? That the state, I mean, how do libraries not serve the interests of the United States, and how are libraries at odds with the furtherance of the president's agenda? But this type of rhetoric is really concerning. And then that the rhetoric also of the shift in just DC around all of the anti-DEI, anti-woke agenda, and that use of language around that we need to restore a focus on patriotism, and that we need to promote American exceptionalism. I mean, these are the quotes from Sonderling's swearing in statement. So I guess, so that's sort of just description of where we're at and our concerns. The call to action, I guess, here is that, this abrupt termination of the grants to states, the IMLS grants to states, this comes in the middle of our federal fiscal year. And this creates very sudden and very significant shortfalls in nearly every state library budget. So because of these urgent and far-reaching consequences and this crisis that we're seeing right in Delaware and the 49 other states, every library is continuing to expand and enhance our site, saveimls.org. If you go to saveimls.org, we have put there a variety of tools that make it easy for any American to contact not only members of Congress, but also their governors and their state legislators. Because every state, or almost every state, I think it's 47, 46 states, begin their new fiscal year on July 1st. And our governors and our state legislators, especially those serving on state budget and finance and appropriations and ways and means committees, they need to act now, right, to stabilize state agency budgets and plan for continuity of service. So on that saveimls.org site, we also have a collection of articles that we've published over the last 12 or 13 years that provide explanations as well as examples of IMLS-funded projects and their positive impact across the country. So we'll continue to update that saveimls.org site. And again, we make that available. And in Delaware, I know through the Alliance and through the state library and the associations, there's other calls to actions and other tools. But I just want you to know that that's available there for you, and that we are working in partnership with the Delaware State Library and the library community on those activities and those calls to actions as well. So that's all I got. I don't know if I'm turning it back now to Annie or to Neil.
I can jump in. Thank you, Annie and Peter. And I appreciate a few things you underlined, both of you. One, just sort of summarizing how we got here to why we are here at the moment, and the importance of unified collaborative advocacy and messaging. That's why we're all on this call. And if I took that for granted at the top of the call, I'm happy that you underlined the importance of sort of standing together for cultural organizations. I'm going to keep us moving just for the sake of time. We can circle back to any questions folks have. Some takeaways I'm taking personally from your comments, the both of you. There is action being taken to combat, as you called it, I think, the systematic dismantling of the IMLS functionality. Our Attorney General, Congress is paying attention. And if we were to hang our hats on anything, I think that that's some positive news to look at. Annie, I didn't ask you before this meeting, but if you know how the federal funding relates to state funding, like the size, I think that would be helpful information too. If that's a fourth, a third, 15%.
Well, I've heard a lot of other states, and Peter might know this better than I do. And I don't know exactly what it is like nationally, like how we compare. But I've heard of other states say it's like a third of their funding, or really significant portion. We think ours is about a sixth, and that's why I'm saying. I mean, we're fortunate because the federal and state officials over time have supported the building of this library infrastructure that we have. And so,
Yep.
we're fortunate, but still.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. We put in the slides here, and we'll send these out afterwards to everybody. Just some other support materials. A shout out to Delaware Libraries Association, who are on the call too, who have developed a one-pager about the services being supported by this funding. I love this next one. Our senator with her ballet slippers and our other 2 members of Congress, why they support libraries. You can see the connection to arts and historical affairs and cultural affairs. And then here are the other pots of funding that you mentioned, Annie, that come through federal sources to the states. So people can peruse this at their own. But let's bring Michelle. Oh, actually, before we do, Suzanne, if I could have you introduce yourself and at any other context, given the work you've done with museums and any other context from the museum side of IMLS.
Certainly. Good afternoon. Suzanne Savory, Director for the Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs. And I just wanted to sort of add to what Annie has presented from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. While there's a funding that comes to the libraries, there's also the Office of Museum Services within IMLS, and that is a separate line of funding. And currently there are 3 grants that come to Delaware, just over 120,000. So that's the current pot. And I'm going to say that since 2019, over 658,000 has come from IMLS to Delaware museums. And so this is a separate line of funding than the libraries. The libraries, on the other side, have received over 6 million since 2019. So the funding is not quite equal. I mean, they used to be separate entities and they've been merged together under IMLS. So the funding that comes from IMLS is primarily special project funding. They used to give away operational money, but that's no longer the case. It's special projects, but those special projects are still tied directly to the mission and the core of these institutions, and it allows them to grow, meet standards, and engage with the community. So they're still essential components of what they do. And most of these are Inspire grants that have come forward, and there's a number of museum categories that IMLS used to fund, and they've all been lost at this point. I will share that the other money that's coming into the museum field has been through the congressional delegated funds that between a lot of that is historic preservation. It's roof work and HVAC work and repairs to buildings, but as well as environmental work that's going on in digitization. And going to say that there was the funds that were awarded to Delaware as a whole. There were, I believe, 81 projects funded in Delaware at 149 million. Of that 149 million, 8.1 seems to be focused on sort of preservation and environmental work, and that was given to 12 organizations. So that has all been removed. So again, special project money, but key. And so that's been lost. And then the final source of funding that has come to some of the museums and the history and humanities have come from the National Park Service. And that is up in the air. They give away 9 categories of competitive grants. We don't know which ones are going to happen in the future. Currently, the semi-quincentennial grants are being funded, and we will learn a whole lot more about what patriotic education is as we move down that line. But we do not know if the Save America's Treasures will move forward, if the ones that are related to African American history and women's history, even disaster recovery will be funded in the future or not. So that's still an unknown. So as we'll have to look forward to what happens on their page. So
Thank you,
that's
Suzanne.
sort of the
Helpful.
current status. And I think that in Delaware, I will say thank you to Neil and the Arts Alliance in Delaware. Arts and humanities are very closely interrelated amongst our agencies. We're too small a state. And I think it's great that we can all work together to help and support each other as we move forward.
Thank you.
Because
This
it's
is
a
hopefully
big
just
project ahead.
the start and continuation of that. I appreciate
Mm-hmm.
that. Michelle, I'd like you to introduce yourself, please. And I think start with just sort of like functionally, what is NEH and what is Delaware Humanities, and how do those two things work together and serve Delaware?
Absolutely, Neil. Thank you for inviting me. I think I'm the only Delaware nonprofit as part of the panel. I mean, I know you're a nonprofit, but
Yes.
you're asking the questions.
Yes.
So we are not, although a lot of people get very confused, we are not a state agency, and in fact only receive about $40,000 a year from the state. That we have received some funding in some years through the Secretary of State's office. But I really appreciate being a part of this group. And I do just really quickly want to say thank you. I've been watching the messages in the feed. Thank you to board members, grantees, program partners, our contractors with Delaware Humanities. I'm seeing all of you in the feed, as well as folks in Senator Blunt Rochester's and Representative McBride's DC offices that we have been in contact with. And I apologize if I didn't see anyone from Senator Coon's office who might be here. We really appreciate all the work that you've been doing on our behalf. In answer to your question, Neil, we have a very close relationship with the NEH, even though we are a private nonprofit. We're one of 56 state and jurisdictional humanities councils across the US and out into the surrounding waters. And we do work closely with the NEH in that we are a statutory part of the NEH's work that they do within that $207 million that we was referred to earlier that went to NEH last year as a congressional appropriation. The state humanities councils as a whole received $65 million. And we work directly with a division within the NEH called the Federal State Partnership. And that is sort of our through line to receive those funds. And just to give you a sense of the scale for us, our budget currently is about $1.1 million. And what we were expecting through our appropriation this year from the NEH is $900,000 to $950,000. So I think you all can have a sense without me giving a percentage that is a significant part of our budget. And it means, a significant loss if this funding is not, sort of returned to us.
Yeah, that's helpful. I'm happy to speak to what's on the slide, or would you like to speak to what you know? You might know more than me, just in terms of the latest in terms of staffing, grants, any other
Absolutely. Yeah,
legislative or legal action.
I don't want to, take too long, but I can say that we learned last Monday, April 1st, that DOJ was at the offices of the NEH. We braced ourselves. We started reaching out to our congressional offices. Again, thank you for responsiveness. And we heard on Wednesday evening through our membership organization, which is the Federation of State Humanities Councils. And we heard that basically what they were saying at that time was 600 NEH program grants were going to be terminated that evening. That's all of the information that we got. So I basically frantically went to the NEH's website and was looking up who in the state of Delaware had active NEH grants, and only pulled up at that point grants for the University of Delaware, reached out to a contact there just to let them know. Little did I know that that evening at almost midnight, I was going to receive letters terminating our NEH general operating support grants. So immediately we were in touch with our membership group. Obviously a huge volume of emails going back and forth, but we did find out nobody within the office, except for the acting director, Michael McDonald, knew that the letters were going out from Doge to all of the state humanities councils. So all staff members reported to work the next day and had to learn from us that our grants had been terminated. They followed up by last Friday by RIFing most of the staff. It's basically division leaders and deputy directors that are still in the office. It doesn't sound like anybody's in processing payments. So we definitely have heard from others in the state that even though they have not received a termination notice for their grant, for their independent grant from the NEH, that still they did not have access to draw down any of their funds for reimbursement. So not only has it been tragic, it's been very confusing in the process too, not only for us, but for all of our grantees. And I can say that we are looking to take action through our membership organization. The Minnesota Attorney General's office stepped forward with a real interest in a lawsuit. And so we are looking at pursuing that action as well as other possibilities through pro bono legal services, but we are looking to fight as well.
That would be a lawsuit led by state humanities councils,
It
not
would
not by state attorneys general.
it would be through the attorneys
Okay.
general.
Okay.
Yeah, if that, and I think, we're just waiting to hear word of language to pass along to, I have passed along information to our Attorney General's office, but we're looking for more information based on the what comes down from the Minnesota State Attorney General.
Yeah, that's helpful. We'll cover sort of calls to action and emails at the end, but again, just reiterate it here that now is a time to be letting your congressperson know and beginning to develop your story about why the humanities benefit you, benefit your organization, benefit your community. Anything else, Michelle, that you'd want to add in terms of context?
I will just say, we've sent out communications in case you haven't received our communications, just to let you know, this is an immediate effect on our regranting program. Almost a quarter of our budget each year is regranted throughout the state of Delaware. All of the little blue boxes are grants that we had throughout the state, 32 last year. And we had to halt that process because those are federal funds coming to us and going directly out into the Delaware community. So if we're not getting the federal funds, unfortunately, we can't put them back out into the Delaware community. We also paused applications for our speakers program, which I know a lot of libraries across the state make use of, and also our new community conversations program. Because those are definitely hard hit by the lack of federal funding. So we're looking at what we can do even without federal funding, and we will have information on our website, dehumanities.org, if and when we're able to open anything back up.
Helpful. Michelle, the last thing I'll ask you, for those on the call that maybe aren't as well versed on the humanities as you are, how do you describe and talk about the work in the humanities, separate from the library, separate from the arts? You know, maybe you can go to a library and wrap your arms around it. You've said you can go to a museum or a
Yeah.
concert and see it in front of you. Like when you're looking at the humanities, what are you looking at, and how important is that for us right now more than ever?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, Neil, because it is difficult. We know even within, our channels that it's difficult to describe the humanities, but we really do look at it as all of those things that are that help you to understand, document, talk about what it is to be human, and your own personal identity. So we do feel like, we are partners with the arts, most definitely. There's a lot of crossover, a lot of areas where the lines blur. Libraries do a lot that are within the world of the humanities, so they are natural partners for us. Museums, one thing that I feel comfortable saying is almost immediately before we started to hear about all of these federal cuts, starting with IMLS, I think 2 days before we heard about IMLS, our board voted to merge with the Delaware Museum Association. So museums are a really important part of what we do, and I hope an important part going forward, of what we continue to do, but definitely, it really, we touch on a lot of different aspects of that human experience.
Yeah. And at points of stress, there are perhaps no greater things to turn to than arts and culture and humanities to understand ourselves and cope with stress and understand what we're going through. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually, I'm looking at the chat too, and I'm seeing that folks are also chiming in too. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Rebecca Lowe, and also Elisa, giving some other examples of the sorts of things that go into the humanities.
Yeah, we're preaching to the choir a bit, but I wanted us to have the chance to sort of just make sure we're defining for those that maybe aren't as familiar. All right, thank you. And let's ask up our last panelist, Jessica, if you could please introduce yourself and just talk, I think, first through like what is the NEA? How does it relate to the department or the Division of the Arts? Unlike the humanities, you are a government agency, and I think that's worth just underscoring, and then walk us through the latest that you've heard.
Sure, thanks, Neil. My name is Jessica Ball. I'm the director of the Delaware Division of the Arts. We are a government agency housed in the Department of State, along with the Division of Libraries and the Division of Historical and Cultural Affairs. The NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, is the federal agency that works to cultivate the arts nationally. They are statutorily mandated to give 40% of their budget to the states in the form of state and regional partnership grants. So we apply to them annually for that funding. I have some slides. I can talk more about it in the later slides. What we know is that the director, Dr. Rosario Jackson, who was appointed by President Biden, stepped down in early January from her position before this administration took office. And Marianne Carter stepped in as the senior advisor at the NEA. She was the chair of the National Endowment for the Arts during Trump's first administration. She is a Trump person. I see here that, she's talking about the fact that the NEA has taken some steps to eliminate positions that were vacant. So there were nobody got fired, but there were some vacant positions that were not statutorily needed, and they've eliminated those. Some of the NEA staff took the buyout. Some worked to seek approval for early retirement. Marianne Carter is working hard to avoid what we have seen happen with IMLS and NEH. She is working hard to make sure that, or try to avoid a reduction in the workforce.
I think worth underscoring the arts are a bit different in that there was a political appointee running this agency since January, which I don't believe was the case in libraries or humanities, and others can correct me if I'm wrong there.
I would say that the fact that Marianne Carter is at the helm of the NEA right now is a good thing for the NEA. She has a direct line to the White House, and I know she was visiting the White House last week. She also has a direct line to one of the head people at Doge. So I would say that she is the right person to be at the helm of the agency right now, in that she is incredibly passionate about the arts, public funding for the arts, and the NEA. She is fighting hard to avoid what has happened in the other cultural agencies. Neil, I believe some of these points are for direct grants from the NEA. So
Yep.
you're saying that December grant offers are still under review. That is
Okay.
for arts organizations or other organizations that applied directly to the NEA. If you have an open award at the NEA right now, if you are a direct grantee, you can currently draw down funds. You can currently submit advance request payments if that's something that your award allows. NEA staff do need to return to office by May 5th, but so far staff have not been laid off or put on administrative leave. Marianne Carter does not yet know the effect of executive orders on the partnership agreements that the NEA has with states. So just to clarify, we at the Division of the Arts have a partnership agreement grant with the NEA. We subgrant that out to our grantees throughout the state. And then the NEA also awards direct grants to folks in the state.
Yeah, thank you. And this last bullet is in reference to direct grants to state to
Right.
organizations.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide.
So this is specific to your partnership grant, which is the largest pot of money coming to Delaware from the NEA.
Yes, so we get at the Delaware Division of the Arts, we get $940,000 a year from the NEA. We met with the NEA at the end of last week. We were told that the council meeting where the NEA's council votes on partnership grants, which typically occurs at the end of March, is postponed to May 1st. Our award notices for our partnership grants typically come in May, and this year they're delayed till June. The federal fiscal year 26 guidelines are typically released in late June. This year, we're expecting to see them towards the end of the summer. Marianne Carter's working to make sure that as little as possible changes from last year to this year in terms of our grant agreements. The staff at the NEA are all at work. They are approving grants and reimbursing grant funds and releasing advances. We have proactively released all of our FY25 final payments to our grantees in an effort to spend down all of our FY25 funding from the feds. So we have an open grant right now for this fiscal year. We have spent that all down. So the feds do not, once they reimburse us for those funds, they will not owe us any money. So if anything happens, we have our money for the rest of this fiscal year. We can go to the next slide.
Yep.
So yeah, as I said, Marianne Carter has been at the White House talking directly to the president. Her advocacy is centered around a few things. She is positioning the NEA and the partnership grants with the states as critical for a successful America 250 celebration. She's also talking about the economic impact of the arts and culture field on the US's economy. She's also talking about the importance of NEA grant funds reaching rural areas, particularly in red states that don't always get or wouldn't otherwise get arts funding. So she is working hard to advocate for the agency. Doge is at the NEA this week, as they were at the NEH last week. There's no expectation or understanding of what the outcome is going to be to the Doge's visit of the NEA. You know, it's important for us to understand that all federal agencies are required to comply with executive orders. The NEA has been trying to determine the best, or how they can do that. We at the states have not received any guidance on new requirements, and we're not going to speculate on what those might look like. We're also not speculating on whether or not funding is going to be there next year. We're going to wait and see what happens. But as I said, we did spend all of our current federal funds just as a proactive measure.
And I would amend that slightly. Wait and see. All of us getting on this call today and organizing ourselves is not quite wait and see, right? It is like organizing, preparing, getting
Oh
ourselves.
yeah, but I mean specifically, we have not changed anything on our end that our grantees need to be concerned about at this point. If changes are made, we will notify everyone with an appropriate amount of time.
Yep.
I think that as we're thinking about as we're hoping that the NEA survives as an agency and that they continue to grant partnership grants as they change requirements, as they change statements of assurances. Those are going to be technical agency compliance issues. So that's something that we as a state agency and the lawyers at the state would deal with. It's not something that our grantees need to be worried about.
Yeah, that's helpful. And so I'd ask you also to help understand sort of the impact on Delaware of if these funds should go away, what happens. And so I know you prepared a few slides here. We can have you talk through also, Jessica.
Sure, I'll try to go through them quite quickly. I think that part of why state arts agencies exist in every state, territory, and jurisdiction are highlighted on this slide.
And relate to libraries, humanities.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
They relate to everyone on this call. Our economies need this public funding. Arts, humanities, culture, history. It's something that every child needs. It's something that every community needs. Arts and humanities are so critical to our well-being.
Yeah.
We we grant out a significant amount of money to support the arts and culture sector in Delaware. Go to the next slide. We have about a dozen grant programs. FY25 will grant out approximately $5.3 million. Next slide. We also run our own programs, including DelawareScene.com and the Delaware statewide artist roster. Next slide. So about 13% of our budget comes from the feds through the NEA. The NEA mandates that states match that 1-to-1. Delaware far outmatches it. The General Assembly allocates about $6 million to us from state funds, and then we do a small draw from our Art Co fund at the Delaware Community Foundation, which is also not impacted by federal funds. Most of our budget goes right out the door in the form of grants, and then less than 25% is spent on our internal costs, our operations, programs, and services.
Yeah, that's helpful context. Thank you, Jessica.
Sure. I just want to make sure we know that, that state funding that is so important to our budget is never guaranteed. Sometimes governors or state legislatures will cut state arts budgets. It has happened this year. So that's why the Delaware Arts Alliance and advocates that are working at the state level are playing such a critical role in the health of the arts sector here in Delaware. Our mission and work is continuing. We're running our grant programs as usual. Our guidelines and deadlines have not changed. There's been a lot of talk about illegal DEI programs. As a public agency, the Division of the Arts already operates in compliance with civil rights laws. We do not exclude anyone or any communities from applying to our grant programs. Our grant decisions are not political. They're based on factors like community responsiveness, artistic excellence, and management capacity. All of our Delaware communities are counting on us, so we're lucky to be able to keep our work going, and we hope that you all will do the same as long as you are able to. I think that in conversations we've been having with our counterparts in other states, a few things have come up as really important. And I think where we can, we should try to use de-escalating language that doesn't stoke or intensify concerns. I think we have to be patient with one another and also with folks that are working in these federal agencies. This is an unfolding situation, and it's a tough context to be working in, and so I think showing each other patience and grace is going to be really important. And then we're working hard to avoid speculation. I know there's changes coming, and I know that requirements might be different, but I think muddying the waters with speculation can cause confusion amongst policymakers and the folks that we need to be advocating for us. So we're trying as hard as we can to share what we really know and not kind of deal in rumors and speculation right now.
Helpful. We're at time. If folks have to run, they have to run. I think we'll probably stay on for another few minutes and just make sure we cover the last of this, which is mostly focused on calls to action. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer them after the fact if we can't on the call.
Can I jump in for just a second?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. Just because we have grantees on this call, and I just want to make it clear and be transparent. I think we found between NEA and NEH, there are a lot of parallels, but there are some ways that the two agencies work a lot differently. So I just don't want any of our potential grantees to hear what Jessica's saying and say, why did that not happen with Delaware Humanities? We don't have access to all of our funding for this fiscal year that we were supposed to be getting. We receive notices of action with each continuing resolution. So we had received notices of action for a total of, I think, about $300,000 of our $900,000 this year. We were waiting for the final notice of action to be processed, so we would have access to it. That never happened before our grant was terminated. And I think we even found out that we have like different windows. We use mainly a reimbursement system, so we pay out and then we are reimbursed by the NEH for that. We can only draw down funds for 5 business days in advance. And I think that's a little bit different for Division of Arts as well, and with the NEA.
Very
So
different.
I did just want to make that clear that I think it's probably even confusing for us because the systems work a little bit differently. But yeah, we are sort of closed off completely to that portion of NEH funds that we had already been granted, which was only about 1/3 of what we were expecting for the full year. Thank you.
That's really helpful context.
Thanks for that
I'm happy you jumped in.
clarification, Michelle.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say that, part of why we acted quickly to get those final payments out and spend down our federal funds is because we were able to see, we had the unfortunate experience of being able to see what happened with IMLS and NEH. And to Michelle's point, we are able to access our funds in advance. And so we took advantage of that, whereas the NEH does not allow that for the humanities councils.
And I wanted to add, we're being proactive about our funds, fingers crossed, trying to take care of that behind the scenes. We'll see.
Yeah, thank you. That's really, really helpful context. And of course, a few months from now, as we look at the FY26 budget, we could be facing zeroed out NEH, NEA, IMLS funding, and then we're all sort of in the same boat. So it's another reason to keep collaborating. Thank you. Again, feel free to add questions in the chat. I just want to close by giving some final context. Oh, actually, before we close, we are sorry, I've forgotten. We're joined by a few, if they're even still on the call. I'm not sure if they had to hop. Yeah, they're still here. Staffers from our congressional offices. Just want to give you all the floor, Brian and Tyler, if there's anything you'd want to offer up to our community here as we're sort of navigating these waters together. And please introduce yourself when you do.
I'll go first. Good afternoon. I'm Brian Short, the State Director for Congresswoman McBride. Neil and everybody on the panel, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to join you and learn at a much deeper level. The role all your organizations play and the impact of these threats from the administration. Certainly the Congresswoman and myself, as Delawareans, know the value that each of your organizations bring to our communities up and down the state. She and I were recently in the Lewis Library and had the opportunity to go through there. Each of your organizations is much more than maybe the title there. You really are what makes the community of Delaware. The thing I'd like to share in this opportunity, Neil, and I appreciate it, is your stories and the direct impact that cuts have to you and your organizations are very important for us to hear those. So we are collecting that information. We use it in our communications with the administration, with other members of Congress. So many of you have already shared with us directly. I'll put my contact in the chats, but please continue to do that. So again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Brian. And happy that Congresswoman McBride is the first Delaware Arts and Culture Caucus member to go on to Congress, where she was participating with us at the state level, and so exciting to have you all down in DC now. Tyler,
thank you.
Yeah, Neil, Annie, thank you for the opportunity to speak and be part of this panel. You guys are the experts. As Brian sort of alluded to, this has been a great crash course for some of us from the federal end that work to get the money. And from that point, you guys are the administrators. So it's fascinating to see how it delineates. Beyond that, we want to be as supportive as possible. I've been communicating with Annie about trying to underscore and substantiate the necessity for some of this funding with Senator Coons to make a visit to one of the libraries or one of the programs or the happenings that are happening within the state. So as those pop up onto the calendar, Please continue to keep us informed because we want to be the sounding board or otherwise the echoing machine to really amplify your voices. So please continue to keep us informed as more things progress. Funding is absolutely questionable. Every aspect of it. The BEAD program that you guys mentioned briefly, 2 of 50 states, Delaware being one of them, that in of itself screams to this administration that if only 2 out of 50 are participating, is it necessary? ARPA funds, even those that have been obligated but have yet to be actually paid, they are doing their darndest to ensure that they do not get paid and they get clawed back as part of this reconciliation. So it's frustrating from our perspective as well because we work so hard to get those appropriated and we're at that finish line just for the rug to be pulled out from underneath us. So I think the open communication that we're having with each other and this planning process is extremely valuable. And I encourage anybody to reach out. I put my email in the chat if there's anything that you think we ought to be more aware of that we aren't already on. So I'll sort of leave it there. I know we've spoken about a lot and we're a little over time. But thank you again, Neil and Annie and everybody else on the panel.
Thank you. And please pass on our appreciation to Senator Coons. He's got a really, really positive voting and action record on arts and humanities and libraries, including every year signs the Dear Colleague letter in support of funding for the arts and humanities. I believe he's a member of the Senate Arts and Humanities Caucus. I'm not sure what the exact title of it is. So just appreciate that he's so active and thank you.
Yeah, happy to echo it. Thank you.
So let's close out for those that are hanging with us here. Just another 3 minutes if you can bear it. Now what? We've heard all this information. Where are we going from here? I'm not going to go through this full slide. We'll stare it out afterwards. I have been really benefiting from reminding myself to take a breath. Every day we get new information about something. Jessica spoke to this earlier. Of this, I'll point out, this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. We are going to be here through next year's budget, the following year's budget. My organization, others will exist to help hopefully be experts for all of you in the field to aggregate and find trends, build community, allow us to lean on each other and work together moving forward. So I encourage you to read through this when you get these slides afterwards. It's literally the backdrop of my computer at the moment. And lastly, call to action. So now what? You heard there's an email campaign from a few different organizations we've linked. We've tried to put those all on one page so it's easy for you to access them. Would encourage you to utilize messaging that is supportive of libraries, humanities, and the arts when you're talking with members of Congress. I think D. Durham asked in the chat, it's a great question. Like, we know our congressional delegation is supportive of the arts and humanities and libraries. Now what? I and others are working with our colleagues across the country to make sure that we have aligned advocacy for other members of Congress to hear this need. But certainly what this link will provide is also a chance for you to tell us your stories. If you email Congress directly, Annie, Michelle, Jessica, myself, Suzanne, we never hear what your stories are. I hope that when you click through this form, you'll share your story with us about impact. Sign up through this link, and that way we'll know who's been activated and engaged here in Delaware, so that if things change, which we know they will at the federal level, as we begin to look at state budgets, which always depend on the economic climate, we may to get involved there, we'll have your information and be able to keep you updated. So I'd encourage you tomorrow, over the weekend, take a look at this link. And if you've already sent an email and you're looking around and saying, now what? It is always a great idea to start building a relationship with your local elected officials, talking to them about the positive impact that these cultural agencies are having on the community. That can be as easy as going to someone's constituent coffee, just showing up, introducing yourself, saying, I care about these issues. Could be following someone on social media. Could be inviting, as we heard today, our elected officials like to go be visible in district and hear directly from their constituents. I'd encourage you all to do that. You may not hear back. It's a busy time, but if you don't reach out and introduce yourself, it certainly won't happen. And then again, as we look to the FY26 Delaware budget and next year's federal budget, there will be plenty of opportunities to get involved. We'll be coordinating, hopefully, as a group ourselves and keeping our lines of communication open so that we can send a unified message to all of you. There's a reminder, civic engagement is not just allowed, it is encouraged. You as individuals and as nonprofit or for-profits can advocate with unlimited time and resources, and you can lobby with very generous time and resources. And mostly all the things that you will be doing fall into the bucket of advocacy, which again is unlimited, not regulated. You can do as much issue advocacy as you want. So we'll close with that. We'll stay informed. We'll send all these links out after the fact for those that want to get activated on these issues. And if we've set up this webinar right, you should hopefully get a feedback survey at the end that pops up after we close out that basically asks, how do we do? Do you have any feedback for us? If these are helpful forums or if there's any information you want, we can provide that. I'm going to close with some like positive thinking, hopefully. You know, when COVID happened, it created some new ways of working for all of us together. I'm hopeful that through this crisis, there will be some new ways of working. Who knows? A few years from now, maybe we're looking at a world where our state is investing in libraries, arts, and humanities at deeper levels than we are now. And we'll have to navigate through these current sort of uncertain waters to get there. But certainly, if it weren't for all of us staying engaged and active, we know we would be even more on the table for cuts than we currently are. So stay engaged, stay informed. Thank you. Hopefully, when I stop this, you will get a feedback survey. And if not, we're info@DelawareArtsAlliance.org for any feedback. All right, thanks everybody. Over time, only by a little bit. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And stop record.